My name is Laura Brown, and these are my lesson plans for sections 4 through 6, and this is going to be on the 6th grade in biological science. The activities I have planned are in 6 different categories. For intro modeling, I'm going to introduce the lesson using a hook. I'm going to clearly state my lesson objectives and write them on the dry erase board. I'm going to define terms and their definitions and write both of them on the classroom dry erase board. I'm going to choose students to read text aloud while the class will follow along. I'll be using the overhead projector to show images of examples from the text of living, non-living, unicellular, and multicellular organisms. I'm going to use the thumbs up, thumbs down method, take a stand technique as a formative assessment tool while taking notes on individual student responses. Before my students are split into their groups, I'm going to model by showing them pre-labeled poster boards of what I expect each group to accomplish. I'm going to show my students where to find their markers, glue sticks, scissors, and magazines, as well as how many items need to be gotten for each group in order to complete their group assignment. I'm going to show them where I expect specific information found during their research to be placed on their group poster boards. During the group assignment, I will circulate and help guide students in their learning while I take notes on individuals within the groups as well as the groups themselves. I'm going to display my poster boards in the front of the class after they're done. This is going to help my students in their review session, and I'm going to use the call and response technique in order to wrap up my lesson. After we've had our review, I'm going to use the exit ticket technique as a quick routine formative assessment tool to get a better understanding of what my students have taken away from this lesson. As far as guided practice, students are going to repeat the definitions and terms that I've written on the board. They're also going to read aloud from their text. I'm going to circle around the room, take notes and objectives, asking individuals as well as group questions, and guide my students while they're in those groups. I'm going to summarize and review the lesson objectives, terms, and definitions with my students after the group work has been completed using student group assignment posters, definitions and terms, and the lesson objectives that I've written and displayed on the front in the front of the classroom on my dry erase boards. As far as independent practice, before they break into groups, they're going to do the take a stand, which will, in unison, the class will provide a thumbs up or thumbs down signal in response to my questions, and I'll be able to take notes on their individual progress. And after the group assignment, they're going to take their exit ticket quiz, which is also done individually, and that will be a great formative assessment tool that is going to show me the specific learning objectives my students have and have not mastered from this lesson. To close up my lesson, after we're done with group assignments, we're going to go back to our individual seats. I am going to have a representative from each group stand up and give the example that that group chose on their assigned category, and I'm going to be asking them to explain why the group knows it belongs in that category. After that, I'm going to use the call and respond technique to review learning objectives, terms, and this is going to be done with the whole class in unison. I can give the definition and then the class gives me the term, or I will give a description and then they will tell me whether it's living, non-living, unicellular, or multicellular. I'll be taking notes on the students' progress there as well. As far as formative assessments, I'm using the take a stand, circulate, and exit ticket. All of these are different ways that I'm going to be able to either take notes on their individual and group learning or actually kind of give them a mini quiz to have a written, assessment of what they're learning and what goals they are and are not mastering. In summary, using the steps above, I can gain information and use that as a good representation of what learning objectives my students have mastered, as well as what information I will need to review with them before moving on to the next lesson. Okay, the fifth section is my materials, and the materials that I will be using as far as for the teacher, I'm going to need a short multimedia presentation. I'm already going to have this on my jump drive, and I'm going to show it to them on the overhead. I'm going to need a list of lesson objectives, a list of definitions and terms for this lesson. I will need my dry erase classroom board, dry erase markers. My students are going to need a copy of the 6th grade biological science textbook. I'm going to also need a copy of the 6th grade biological science textbook, and I'm going to have pre-marked examples of the living, non-living, multicellular, and unicellular organisms done with Post-its so that I can be ready to show my students examples that I've already marked that are in the book on the overhead projector. As far as for the teacher, I'll also need overhead projector, Post-it tabs, and a notepad with a list of students' names so that when I'm doing the student assessment, I can take notes on each student individually. My students are going to need 8 large poster board sheets, 2 per group. They're going to be pre-labeled with headings of the non-living, living, and then unicellular, multicellular. My students are going to need black magic markers. They're going to need scissors, glue sticks, and 8 National Geographic magazines. I want these to be used magazines so that they are something that my students can cut pictures from. Then as far as teacher, I'll need tape to put the poster boards on the board. I'm going to need student sticks and the can. These are going to be used during cold call, so they need to be pre-labeled. And the students and teachers both, or student and teacher, will both need the exit ticket quiz. It's going to be pre-made, a copy for each student and as well as a teacher copy. I've chosen these materials because by having the materials listed above, it will ensure that as a teacher, I'm fully prepared to teach my students the lesson objectives I have planned. Having the materials above will also ensure that my students have all that we need for them to successfully complete the lesson and master the learning objectives I've set forth. Having the formative assessment tools listed will allow for me as their teacher to gain a complete understanding of what my students have and have not learned so I can plan and adjust, explain, or plan on moving to the next level. The last and final section is section 6, and that's on evaluation. How and when do I plan to evaluate student learning on the content of this lesson? First, I'm going to evaluate students individually using cold call. This is going to help me assess their reading skills. I will use the take a stand technique to assess individual learning of the lesson objectives. That's the giving me the thumbs up, thumbs down response to my questions, and I'm just going to take notes on my personal pad so that I will be able to review those later. I'm going to evaluate students while they are in a group setting by taking notes on individual participation, their social skills, as well as individual knowledge. I'm going to achieve this by using the circulating technique and asking individual questions and observing my students and taking notes on that notepad as well. After completing the group assignment, a student representative from each group is going to stand and give their group's examples for the chosen category and explain how their group knew that this example belonged in that category. During that process, I'm also going to be taking notes on how well each group accomplished their task and how well they worked together. I'm going to be using call and response to help students review the summarized lesson objectives. I'll also be individually evaluating them by taking notes of how well they can connect the information that they learned in the group setting into what I need them to know as far as on an individual learning basis. Finally, I'm going to use the exit ticket as a formative assessment tool. It will be giving my students a short quiz highlighting the main focus of the lesson objectives, and I'll collect those obviously before they leave and be able to review them. The reasons I've chosen this approach for my evaluations are as followed. Using cold call and my written evaluations, as well as take a stand, call and response, circulating, and exit ticket, Also evaluating my students in group settings, as well as having a student from each group stand and give an example and explain why they've done that. All of those are going to achieve my lesson goals, as well as it's going to follow the CCSS that have been set forth. Once that I've evaluated using the techniques that I just listed, as well as examining my teacher notes, I will know if my students have mastered the 5 lesson goals that I have set forth in this lesson for them.